Well, you talk about being born and you talk about early life journeys. I am living proof that you are born gay. I think we start being ourselves from the moment we're born. I was born in Miami Beach. We moved around a lot. I've lived in 17 states. It was a very interesting childhood, never finishing 1 year of school in the same school. We traveled a lot being poor, where you went from town to town and then you didn't leave that town until you got more money from a charity to get to the next town. And once they hit the Pacific Ocean, they stopped. And so I consider Southern California really where I'm from, even though I didn't get there until I was 13. I did the whole crying, why me? Why am I this way? Why can't I be straight like my friends? Why aren't I attracted to girls? I remember doing that in junior high school. I know a lot of people do it later in life, but I was in seventh grade when I basically came out. And all that meant was I stopped telling myself the narrative that everyone else was telling me about what my life was supposed to be and acknowledged what my life was going to be. I had that argument with Dan Savage about the It Gets Better campaign. I said, no, it never gets better. What changes is your ability to deal with the bullshit. I took Barbara Streisand's advice. I heard her in an interview in the 70s say, I didn't want them to laugh at me. I wanted them to laugh with me. So I became this larger than life sort of persona to protect myself, to insulate myself from their attacks. As I later would say in life when I lived in Huntington Beach, calling me gay or queer isn't an insult, it's an observation. Is that the best you've got to throw at me? Because if you can't tell, then I'm doing something wrong. So I took their power away by saying, you can be as mean as you want to, but guess what? It's not going to be a revelation to anybody because I'm already owning it. And remember, this is in the 70s, late 70s, before there was all this okay to be queer and okay to dress as you want or whatever. I have always dressed the way that I've wanted to. Well, I started at Columbia City College in theater, and after about a year and a half, 2 years, I said, I'm not going to need a degree to be an entertainer. Either you're talented or you're not. So I got into drag because the imperial court system was both activist and very accepting. Now, I had never wanted to be a drag queen, but I wanted to MC the shows, and they said, you got to be in drag. So I got in drag, and they called me the Divine Miss Mess because I did Bette Midler. And it was fabulous to be exposed to the gay music scene. So once I started getting exposed to that, I'm like, I want to make this. I want to make some of this music, and subsequently started. And then, because I was broke and I could write, I started doing a column called Out and About for Update Magazine. And that got me invited to all these events. Because in high school, I wrote for the school paper, and I realized you could get invited to a lot of events that you couldn't afford to go to. So I continued writing for gay publications, LA Edge, Frontiers, Update. And I did that not just to have a personal opinion column, but to also feature businesses and such because they would buy you drinks, they would give you dinner, they would invite you to the events. So I kind of got to bring it all together. I could perform, I could also write and take pictures. And then AIDS came around. I was covering it for Edge, Frontiers. And then suddenly our friends started dying. And you'd see someone at a bar, and then a week later they were gone. That really got me active in the HIV/AIDS space and activism in the HIV, going to hospitals, hugging people, being patient advocates, helping our friends die. I can't count how many friends I helped die. As a 61-year-old gay male, I'm basically alone because most of the people my age died. There's a generation that died. And so they're not here. So my friends are either in their 30s and 40s or in their 70s. From 50 to 65, I have very few gay friends because they're dead. Living through that, and we were so young. My God, 84, 85, the music sort of stopped, I would later partner with someone who was HIV positive, and I'm still HIV negative, not whatever. I was with a person, we lived together for 12 years, all through the 80s, basically, until 89, until I met Andrew. Most people thought we were lovers because we were inseparable. We did everything together. We slept in the same bed, but yet we weren't lovers. But I stayed in it because I adored him and I wanted to be in his universe. That goes back to self-esteem. When I met Andrew in 1989, all of that changed because suddenly there was this gorgeous little redhead who loved me for me. And that was new. Now, he had HIV. He told me on the first date. I said, you're just trying to scare me off. He goes, no, I really have HIV. And I said, well, we're all going to die of something because I'm not scared. And he had been kicked out of his house because of AIDS. His family said, you can't be around the kids, get out. They put him at the hotel, Motel 6, next to the frat house. I met him at the frat house. The true story of my very first real relationship, which was Andrew, is kind of frightening in today's world because you all would consider me a stalker. But I met Andrew. He ended up going home with my friend because my friend had a boat and good pot. But I wanted to see him again. And he had mentioned he was going to Big Bear that weekend to be with his family. And his name was Andrew Howard. That much I knew. So I called every Howard in Big Bear and finally found him. And he picks up the phone. He's like, how did you find me? I said, oh, I'm going to always know where you're at. You should get used to that. And he's like, no, like, just no, I just met you, And I said, well, Sunday, I worked with Jackson Jones Limo at the time. So I had limos. And I said, I'll send a limo for you to the Motel 6. When should I pick you up? Because I'm not coming down. I am not going to Janet Jackson with you. And I can't believe you called every Howard. And he came down. We went to Janet Jackson. And 8 days later, he moved in. And we were not apart 24 hours in 11 and a half years. It started at a Motel 6 after a Janet Jackson concert. And he was everything I'm not. He was confident. He was secure. He was unimpressed, which I loved. But in no way did I trap him into it. He wouldn't have done anything that he didn't want to do. And that dynamic is why we ended up on radio, because he was the opposite. I was talkative and bombastic. He was quiet and to the point. And that's why it worked. I was promoting a record. And I went up to Groove Radio, which was here in LA. And I'm on the air for 3 hours. And like Vanity was late. And she goes, oh, I'm sorry, I had trouble. And I go, doing what? Like, what are you famous for other than fucking Prince? And all of this going out live on the radio. I get in the car and I have the brick Motorola phone, the $2 a minute cell phone. Andrew calls. He listened, of course, and said, they're going to ask you back. And I said, no, I'm done. I promoted the record. I'm done. They asked me back. And they asked me back 6 times. A man named Malcolm Berman went to Steve Sapellis, the program director or music director at 1031 at Groove, and said, I'm putting together a weekend show on KYPA, a bartered radio station that has 3,000 watts and is basically heard in West Hollywood only. And I want to do an entertainment show. Do you know someone that would be good? And Steve Sapellis said, you should call Karel. So this Malcolm calls me, and I'm like, what? A radio show? Like, who are you? I thought it was a fake, so I met him down at a hotel lobby because he wouldn't come into my house. I met him, and he said, yeah, so I did the show. It was called Different After Dark, and he had a lesbian as my co-host. But Andrew would come with me. Then Ellen or Rosie or someone was going to come out, and Andrew had something to say about it. And so he wanted a spot on the show to say something. And I said, well, okay, sure. So he writes a little editorial. He's so proud, and he comes on the show, and he reads the editorial. I disagreed with some of the things he said, so I started on him, and we just started doing what we do, being in love. And immediately after the show, and unbeknownst to me, Malcolm went and fired my co-host and went to Andrew and said, you're the new co-host. And he said, I don't want to be famous. I don't want to be on the radio. I'm a writer. I want to be a housewife and write. And he said, well, you're the co-host. So the next week he came with me begrudgingly. I don't want to do this. I'm only doing this for you. And we did this Different After Dark show, which was just an entertainment show where we shot the shit from midnight to 4 a.m. in West Hollywood. I did a tape. Triangle Broadcasting heard it. They were doing a gay network out of Palm Springs. They were going to be heard on a station in Seattle and in Palm Springs, and they offered us the morning show. So we started doing the morning show for KYPA. Good Morning Gay America is what it was called. So then after about a year of this, I made another tape and I asked Malcolm Berman, what's the #1 talk station in the country? He said, KFI Radio. And I said, oh, okay, I got to send him the tape. He goes, they are never going to listen to you. You're gay. You've only been on radio now like 3 years. They're not going to listen to you. Okay. Sent the tape. David Hall finally took a meeting and he said, why do you want to be on KFI? Why do you want to be on the station? And I go, well, I heard you were the #1. He said, we are. So if that's why? I go, well, yeah, start at the top. I said, I don't want to do 10 years in Poughkeepsie and then have to go. No, you're here. You're in LA. I don't want to move. You're the #1. You're the most heard and you need us. He was flabbergasted at the audacity. They offered us a fill-in for a woman who went off to Hawaii. And then she was gone for 3 weeks, so they asked us to come back the next 3 weeks. So we did. Suddenly we have a producer and we're KFI. And even though it was afternoon radio in the afternoon on weekends, 4 to 7, I think it was, it sort of made a little stir. Like, have you heard those gay guys on the weekend? So the next week, the fourth week, Tim and Neil were going out and they were 10 to 1, Monday through Friday. And they said, do you guys want to fill in for them? And we're like, well, sure, but it's kind of hard because we don't have a card to get in. And Mark said, you didn't get your employee packages? And I'm like, no. He goes, oh, I'll have that sent down to you. And I hung up the phone and Andrew goes, what happened? I go, well, we're filling in for Tim and Neil and I think we've just been hired by KFI. And he said, really? And I said, well, they're sending an employee package and cards to get in the building. So we did Tim and Neil, and then we just started filling in for everybody. Then Bill Handel, the #1 show, morning show, he went on vacation, and David Hall asked us to fill in for Bill Handel. Now, this is big. This is mornings. It's the #1 spot. It's not 10 to midnight. It's 5 a.m. to 9 a.m. We fill in. That afternoon, John and Ken on their show went ballistic. Who are these nobodies? They're flamingly gay, and they just attacked our gayness, and just to where it was litigious. So much so that 2 gay organizations contacted KFI on our behalf. We didn't even contact them. We hadn't heard it. We didn't know what happened. We went in the studio the next morning. Everyone's like, oh, and we're like, what the fuck? What happened? Someone played us the tape, and we just looked at each other like, so what? So these 2 assholes in the afternoon, went off on us. Big deal. Well, it was a big deal. And suddenly we're in the press and we're being written about and all this other stuff. So we fill in and we keep filling in. And then after about a year of filling in, they said, do you want to do John and Ken? And I said, so how long will we be filling in for John and Ken? And they said, you're not filling in. Your afternoon drive. We were still broke, paying off our student loans. And they said, oh, yeah, you're after scale, so it's $110,000. So when we got home, Andrew said, so we're going to get $110,000. I said, yeah. And he goes, each? And I go, I didn't ask. So I call Mark Thomas and I go, is that each? He goes, well, of course, you're 2 separate people. And I hung up the phone and I go, yeah, that's each. The next thing I know, Andrew's like getting ready. I said, where are you going? He goes, shopping. And so they had to hire extra staff for the first week of us taking over because of all the calls that came in to the station. Like, who the fuck? What's going on?
There's a new duo on the air who themselves are a hot topic. Their names are Karel and Andrew.
I am Karel.
And I'm Andrew.
And
It's 7 p.m. at one of the nation's most popular talk radio stations.
Every news station in the country did a feature on us. I mean, every one, from CNN down to local KTLA. And it was unexpected and not a path I ever thought I would be on. But that's how the radio came to be. And we were the lowest paid in LA. And yet we're making combined $300,000-$400,000 a year. Yeah, we were the first, but we didn't know that was going to make the big deal that it made. It was a bigger deal to other people. We were just going to work. He was the first relationship that was real, was the right place for me to be and the right place for him to be. He thought he would be dead by 30. I said, oh, bullshit. You're going to be a beautiful 30-year-old. And he was alive at 30. Well, I got him into a drug study at Stanford for what would become protease inhibitors. He was on the cover of every magazine in the country. We had to go tell our neighbors all about his AIDS because he was about to be me and him were going to be on CNN, MSNBC, Fox News, just everything because protease inhibitors were about to break. They called Stanford and said, do you have a success? He was a success. They called us, said, do you mind if we give these journalists your info? We were already doing radio. And he said, no, go ahead and give it to him. And so suddenly he became the poster boy for protease inhibitors. It was a big deal. But I think that because we were so opposite is why that was so special. I wish that I could be the lover to him now back then, because I'm more secure now. I was always like, oh, why, you went to the mall and you took, 6 hours and supposed to be gone for 3. What were you doing those other 3 hours? That kind of thing. And that was unnecessary. He never cheated. But my insecurity about how could he love me? How could this gorgeous, young, beautiful thing love me? This large, loud entertainer. I've worked through that, but it was his death and dealing with the repercussions of that actually helped me work through that. So I wish I could go back and and be a little bit different. But we were kids, I mean, he was 24, I was 28. He died when I was 39, when he was 34. So we were together 11 and a half years. You grow and you change out once you're out of your 30s and into your 40s. And I just wish I could have been better. What became important was, as a couple, the fact that we loved each other and then went on to #1 talk radio as the first gay couple to ever have it happen. And we're on television all the time. And we're just us, just fighting like we always fight. The fact that straight people saw that and saw themselves in it, so much so that when he died, I got over 200,000 cards, handwritten cards. I still have trunkfuls of them that I haven't gone through. Of, oh my God, me and my husband are just like you. I'm the Karel, he's the Andrew. This is pre-marriage. This is pre-rights. And here we had all these straight people talking about how they were like us. And that's powerful to people who may not have understood a gay couple before. And now suddenly they could, because they heard us every day in their car and they heard we're just like them. We fight about the same issues. We love each other the same way. We care about each other the same way. It normalized a gay relationship for everyone that heard it. I look back at that relationship and just think how special. You only get one of those. Now, I'm open to dating again, although I'm 61 and gay, and that's pretty much a death sentence. But if I never have another one, that one mattered so much that it won't matter in my lifetime, because I had one that really, really mattered. And so when he died, really unexpectedly, that weekend, that Gay Pride weekend, and they told me he was just having a seizure when he was really having a blood clot in his heart. When that happened, it made national news. And I knew it was wrong. I remember the last words I ever said to Andrew, he was not conscious, but I walked over to him and they're pounding on him and they're doing the CPR and there's bruises forming around the guy's hands and they're yelling 5 amps of this and 10 amps of that. I leaned over and I said, okay, this is going to make a really great topic on the show next week, but I really need you to come back. I really need you to wake up now. This is, And they said to me, do you want us to stop? And I thought, you haven't given me any deference as his partner the whole time I've been here. And now you're asking me if you want me to stop? No, I want you to do what they do on ER. I want you to crack his chest and I want you to... But they stopped. And then I got to bring attention both to medical mistakes and how 250,000 people a year... It's actually the #1 cause of death in America is medical mistakes. And when they told me that I couldn't sue, his parents were going to join me in the lawsuit because they had standing. And then they just said they just couldn't go through it. So they dropped out on the way to the deposition. And so the insurance companies and everybody treated me like a nothing because they said, you don't have standing. You couldn't be legally married. You were just domestic partners. Domestic partners don't have those benefits. And I said, well, they should. And they said, well, they don't. And so when Judge Margaret Hay threw the case out, I said, we'll see. And 6 years later, I walked into her courtroom with the decision that reversed her decision, saying I did have a right to sue. And I threw it on her bench and almost got arrested by the bailiff and said, you've been overturned, bitch, and walked out of the courtroom. I had been treated as such a nobody. I slept next to the man for 11 years. I would never apart from him. I was involved in every aspect of his life. And you're going to tell me I can't sue for wrongful death because your paperwork says I can't? No. And again, I didn't have a choice. I had no choice. I had to sue. What they did to him was wrong. Yes, after Andrew passed, I stayed at KFI. My salary in one day from $400,000 with me and Andrew plus endorsements to $52,000 because they didn't know we were a team. They didn't know what to do with me, so they just put me on weekends again and cut everything, endorsements, salaries, everything. I have a back disability. I was on a lot of OxyContin. Andrew being gone and all of the drama surrounding that, I medicated. I'd like to say I didn't, but like so many gays, the substances were there and I did them. It was OxyContin. Legally prescribed, but Soma, Xanax, just a lot of stuff. And I felt very entitled at that time, very angry and entitled. So TV was calling, but I saw myself as Karel, the radio host, and everything had just been taken away from me, meaning Andrew. And my house was going to be up in jeopardy and all of this other stuff. So I didn't want to let go of radio. I held on to it. I shouldn't have. I should have let it go and gone to television, gotten an agent and just kept doing TV. But I didn't, and I got fired at KFI, did more of the Ultimate Revenge. That process took about a year, from Andrew's death till the time they fired me. One of the stations I was pitching was KGO San Francisco, and they hired me. And I became the only out gay host working in the Bay Area on talk radio. And I stayed there until they union busted in 2015, where they wanted people to work for much less money and not be union, and I just wouldn't do it, so they fired me. In 2015, when that ended, sort of branched out after KGO into more television and podcasting, which is the new radio. That was quite a journey from KFI to KGO, and then being fired, and then being hired. And so I think that my next challenge ahead of me is reinvention. The industries have all changed. Radio is almost gone. Television is now pay for play, where you have to bring them completed series and then they license it from you. Podcasting, you don't make a ton of money at. Only like 10 podcasters make a lot of money. So everything that I do from live performance on has changed radically. And like music, you get nothing from streaming, and, no one buys records anymore. So, and you go on tour and you can go in debt going on a tour. So everything has changed. That's going to be the next big challenge for me, is reinventing. So who'd have thought doing my job and loving Andrew and being me for all these decades would get me on a wall? To feel the love from a community that I've been almost at odds with, it was just the most overwhelming thing. A great honor. Andrew wanted to start a gay walk of fame in Hollywood called the Walk of Pride. And that's sort of what that wall is. And I said to Andrew, you may not have started your walk of pride, but you made it on the wall. You mattered. He died so young, and he mattered to me and obviously to a lot of other people. And I was approached at that ceremony by a woman who had run Pride for like 15 years. And she said, this took 12 years. She said, your name has been in nomination for 12 years. This took 12 years. And I just thought, well, better late than never. And so it made me feel like I got my flowers when I was alive. And that's a beautiful thing. I lived. I was out front. I was loud and proud. And that's what that wall symbolizes. I lived. I did it. I'm here at the Gay Archives talking to you about my history as a gay person simply because I made the choice to be me.
In a world that tried to keep us apart, we held on tight, heart to heart. Love unspoken, but so deep and true. Every day felt new with you. Through whispered dreams and silent fights, we found strength in hidden lies. Though you're gone, your love remains. It calls a joy in the softest pain.